Hi guys and welcome back to the Emily Knits channel. My name is Emily. I am a knitter and crocheter in my mid-30s, based in the north of Nottinghamshire in the UK, where I live close to Sherwood Forest with my other half and our two dogs. Normally I tend to produce podcasts on this channel, but today I have another pattern roundup for you. So I realise that this is going to be coming out in fairly early August, but if you live in the UK like me, you will know we've had a really terrible summer. And I have definitely got into the autumn knitting mood a little bit sooner. A lot of other people I've spoken to in the knitting community are the same as well. And I do think that cardigans, which is what we're going to talk about today, are something that are really useful all year round. Sorry, excuse me, adjusting my bra. So today, we have a roundup of cardigan patterns that I wanted to share with you guys that are on my to be knit list in the next sort of few months. I'm not going to be able to knit all of these. I'm absolutely not. I wish I could, because there's some really beautiful ones, but yeah, some of these you will most likely see on my needles very shortly. I'm particularly focusing on cardigans because I realise that they're probably the most worn things in my wardrobe for me. So I have this one, which is a crochet cardigan that I finished about a month ago. This is a slightly modified version of the Mezzo cardigan by Jess Coppom, who is the Make and Do crew. This is a crochet. Did I say it's crochet? It's crochet. And I crocheted this in Stylecraft Grace, which is a mohair acrylic and wool blend. And I also have, I think I've worn it in a video before, but I'll put up some pictures here of the sample for this. This is the Basic Bee cardigan by Beckie K Designs. I test knit this about a year ago, something like that, and this has been my most worn cardigan. It's been my most worn piece of knitwear, really, because I find for me, especially when you live in the UK, it doesn't really get cold enough necessarily all the time that it's okay, let me start that bit again. I don't want to get changed during the day. I am lazy. I realise this is a me thing. I don't want to. I want to get dressed in the morning and not have to worry about it. I'm lucky that I work from home, so I try to. Most of the time I work from home, so I try to get dressed in something that is work suitable. Like this is my recently finished tendril tee. This is very definitely work suitable for me, because most of what I do is on Teams, and you see me sat there. And then I don't want to change for the rest of the day. I'm just lazy. I really am. So for me, sometimes I don't also like wearing, sometimes it's a bit too hot to wear a sweater all day. And if I then want to change out of that sweater that I've put on in the morning, I have to go and fully change, because it's usually a little bit too mild in the UK to wear a t-shirt and then a sweater over top. I am not at all bothered by things next to my skin. I've not yet found anything that is too scratchy for me to have next to my skin. I've not really worked with any Lopi, so that might be the difference, but I've not really found anything at all that I don't feel comfortable wearing next to skin. So either it needs to be cold enough that I can put on a sweater and leave the sweater on all day and not have to worry about changing, or a cardigan is where that comes in, because I'll get dressed in something in the morning, and then when it gets a bit cold, like it has done this afternoon here, I'll go and grab a cardigan and I'll chuck it on. The Basic Bee cardigan I haven't got here with me because it's in the car at the moment, because I keep it in the car because when we go to the cinema, it goes with me every time. We go usually every couple of weeks to the cinema. I always get cold in the cinema, and I love snuggling up under it. It's absolutely beautiful. And it is, to say, it's my most worn piece of knitwear, full stop. Most worn, most used, however you want to consider it. It is far more than anything else that I've made. So thinking about that made me realise that cardigans are a very big piece of my wardrobe, and something that really I should make far more of, because I'll get more use out of, and that's partly where this came from, and this was a stash busting project as well. I have a cardigan here that I'm working on that I can't tell you anything about because it's a secret test knit for In Her Skein. The name is going to be the Orma cardigan, and it's coming out in Liner magazine, I think, in 2025, so I'm test knitting that at the moment. I can't show you that or tell you that or anything. When it comes out, so far, I'd very highly recommend the pattern because it's beautiful, and if I could, I'd put it on this list. But yeah, so all that to say, cardigans have very much been at the forefront of my mind, and I have a list here, along with a very strong coffee, of 10 plus 1, so technically 11, but that'll make sense when I get to it. That I have. Some of these I have already in my stash, or I've knit from these designers before. Some of them I haven't, but I found them on Ravelry and they seem to be, well test knitted. So we're going to go through them. Unlike last time when I did one of these, I'm not going to talk through the yarns I'd use for them unless there is a specific one that I think lends itself to it. because I wanted to include more patterns in this for you rather than taking loads of time talking about yarn. So we're just going to go through the patterns. I want to talk about why I like them, if there's anything I would change about them, and yeah, what I think they'd be good for, basically. So without any further ado, grab yourself a drink. I've got one, which is a little bit too strong, actually, even for me. I love a strong coffee. That is, ooh, I'm going to be awake after that. So yeah, let's get into it. I should say before we properly get into it as well, if I'm looking down, I'm really sorry. I've got notes and things in my book because I've got all sizes and yardage requirements and things for you to make sure you've got all the full information. But I'm not very good at remembering this stuff to tell you, so I will be looking down, and I'm really sorry. I'll try and minimise that. Okay, so the first cardigan I wanted to talk about, I have in my pattern library and is probably quite likely one that I cast on quite quickly. So I've had it in my pattern library for a couple of years. I just haven't got around to knitting it yet. And this is the Isa cardigan by Alex of Vert and Rose is her designer name on Ravelry. I've tested a couple of things for Alex in the past. My Malvina sweater, which if you've seen my least worn knits video, that's actually in there. And that's not anything to do with the pattern, it's to do with my yarn choice and the fact that I didn't block my swatch. So when I finished it, I blocked the garment and it grew massively. But the pattern is beautiful, and I've tested some socks for her as well with that same sleeve lace pattern that's on the sleeves on that Malvina sweater. Her patterns tend to be fairly, there's not a lot of hand holding in there, but everything that you need is in there, and yeah, she does some really beautiful patterns. And the Isa cardigan I think is beautiful. It's this bottom up cardigan with these sort of lace panels that come up the sides, and I don't think they go up the back, I think it's just up the fronts. So it's bottom up, so you're knitting flat back and forth, it's not steeked. And I think these lace panels make a really, really nice interest. Whilst not being too, looking at it, I think it's fairly simple. It's probably a combination of yarn overs and knit two togethers or slip slip knits and things like that. So it's not daunting, I don't think. If you've never done lace before, I think it would be quite accessible. But I think it looks really effective. So this is a DK weight cardigan. It's knit on 45mm needles. Can you imagine? That would be massive. It's knit on 4.5mm needles, and it has a gauge of 18 stitches by 30 rows, so a fairly quick knit, I would imagine, on those size needles with that gauge. And it has a fully size inclusive size range. I should have said all of these do. If they don't have, I haven't included in them, because 9 times out of 10, if they don't have, I can't knit them. I have a 47 to 50 inch bust depending on the time of the month. I'm 6 feet tall, and I just, sometimes in a non-size inclusive pattern, I can knit the biggest size, but I wouldn't ever recommend that to you guys because I shouldn't be the biggest size in that pattern. I also think there should be plenty of smaller sizes than me as well. So these will all be fully size inclusive. And yeah, they should all fit everybody, basically. So yeah, this one goes from an extra small up to a 5X. And that is an 88 centimetre to 166 centimetre bust measurement. So she recommends 8 to 12 centimetres of ease, but the measurements are on the bust measurement. So even if you were slightly bigger than 166 centimetre bust, you could. That's with a suggested ease of up to 12 centimetres. So you could maybe knit it with a little bit less ease. And for those sizes, it ranges from 720 metres of yarn at the very smallest up to 1060 metres at the highest. It's DK weight and it's a single strand held together. So again, you could knit this in fingering weight and mohair would probably give you the same gauge and would create a nice sort of fluffy feel. I like it in a solid colour. I think it looks really nice in that. So that is absolutely one that will probably find its way to my needles quite quickly. The second one is another one that's in my pattern library and I've had in there for a while, although it has just been updated, and I've tried to knit this before and I had a nightmare with it, but the problem wasn't with the pattern. So this is one of the very first garments I ever tried to knit, and I did try to it was the first cardigan I tried to knit, I think, and basically I just didn't really understand gauge swatching at the time, so I just picked a yarn, picked some needles and went for it and thought this will work fine. And then I got about halfway down the yoke and put it against me and it was about out here, and I couldn't work out why. So yeah, it was entirely me, not anything else. But this is the Aosta cardigan by the Knit Purl Girl. Now, you'll have heard me mentioning Sophie of the Knit Purl Girl before. This is one of her patterns, the Tendril Tee. I've knit quite a few of them. I've test knit for her before, and she's very size inclusive anyway, but she has just gone back and done a size update on the Aosta cardigan. There is also a whole Aosta family of patterns. I think there's a summer top, there's some home patterns, there's a blanket and things like that. So if you wanted to knit this but you don't want the cardigan version, go check out Sophie's other patterns, because they've all used this same sort of seed stitch, or Andalusian stitch I think it's called. Now this is a top-down chunky weight cardigan. She recommends you use a blown yarn, something like Sanders Gown Cos, or Drops Air, Wish. One of those is chunky weight, and I think it's, I get this wrong every time, I think it's Air, which is the same as what I've knit my Basic B cardigan in, and it is so light. You get such a warm, cozy cardigan for such a light weight that it's really lovely. The one thing I will say about this, the recommended yarn to make this in is, it's a Sanders Gown yarn, and I can't remember what it is, I'll pop it on screen, but she recommends holding 2 strands of that together and a mohair to get the chunky weight, which would probably be lovely, but would make it a little bit more expensive because you're having to buy double the yardage plus a mohair. But one thing Sophie always does very well, and this is no exception, is there is a whole section in there on yarn substitution and other yarns that she suggests might be good. I'm so sorry if that's picking up. Hi guys, it's Editing Emily just popping in. You will have probably just heard then that I started having some problems with noise from outside. One of my neighbours was doing a bit of DIY, and in a moment you're going to see I have actually had to leave it till the next day to go back and film the next bit, but I've realised on coming to edit this that I didn't finish telling you about the Aosta cardigan, so let me finish talking about that now. So what I was saying was, when Sophie, whenever I've tested for Sophie, what she does is she keeps a note of the yarn that her testers use, and then she'll use that in the pattern and in the profile page on Ravelry to recommend yarns that you could use as substitutions for whatever she suggested in the pattern. So there are quite a lot of substitution recommendations on there as well. But I didn't actually finish telling you about the pattern at all. So it's knit with the chunky weight yarn. She suggests a blown yarn, like I'd said. It's knit on 7mm needles with a gauge of 14 stitches and 21 inches. 14 stitches and 21 rows per 4 inches. So this would grow really quite quick. And this would be something that would be, I think you really want that blown yarn in there, because that's what's going to make it not a really, really heavy kind of garment. The blown yarn's going to make it more light and airy while still being that chunky weight. Sophie's patterns, like I mentioned, are always really size inclusive. So this goes from a size A to a size K, which is a 29.5 inch to 57 inch chest measurement with 3 inches of ease built in there as well. So the pattern itself goes up to 60 inches to fit a 57 inch chest at the very biggest. The suggested yardages are actually quite light as well for such a chunky yarn. So it suggests 625 metres to 1050 metres of blown yarn. And yeah, like I said, I mentioned briefly, there is a Aosta summer top, there's an Aosta sweater, there's an Aosta cardigan, there's some home stuff. I think there's an Aosta camisole. There is so many things within this family, and she does loads of other fantastic patterns that you've probably heard me talk about some of them already. So if you like the look of this, go and check the other ones out as well. Okay, so it's now the following day. So I've forgotten my coffee, which I'm just going to go grab in a second. The lighting has changed. My hair's probably changed. My outfit's slightly changed. Yeah, I don't know how much of it I'm going to keep in when I come to editing, but yesterday, unfortunately, we are in summer still, and because we've had a little bit of nice weather recently in the UK, one of my neighbours had started using a hedge trimmer, and you could just hear that over the top of me when I listened back to the audio, and it kept going on for quite a while. So I just thought, you know what, we're going to leave it. We're going to come back tomorrow. Okay, so take 3, 4 after the postie's gone. There's a lawnmower now, but it's quite far in the distance, so I'm really hoping it's not going to pick up. So we're just going to carry on. I'm going to try and pick up from where I was yesterday. Excuse a little bit of rustling. Sorry about that. If I've missed any details, I'll add them in somewhere. But yeah, I think I talked about the Isa cardigan and the Aosta cardigan. I think I'd finished talking about both of them. So let's move on. One thing I have realised, one thing that did work out quite well, is because obviously, like I said, I filmed and then had to stop. I did remember overnight that there was another pattern that I wanted to include in here. there was another pattern that I wanted to include in here that I'd forgotten to get the details for. So we have 12 things to talk about today now. So you've got an extra one that I'm really glad I remembered. So let's crack on. So the third one that I wanted to talk about was the Bryce Pillar cardigan by Kerri Blummer on Ravelry. This is a drop shoulder bottom up cardigan, and there's going to be a bit of a theme with some of these that you're going to see. I at the moment I'm really loving like cable details and things like that. There is a colourwork cardigan in here as well, but texture is really what I'm craving this year. And I think you know, there's some really beautiful patterns out there. This is one of them. So this has got these gorgeous cable patterns coming up here. It's got a big shawl collar. It's got seed stitch everywhere else. And it's a DK to light worsted weight yarn, so I think this would make a really lovely, cosy, quite oversized cardigan, but really sort of chunky and warm. This is on 4.5mm needles with a gauge of 16 stitches to 29 rows, so it's quite a wide gauge again, so it should knit up quite quickly. And the size is run from a 34-inch bust all the way up to a 70-inch bust, which is suggested 1,001 to 2,281 metres of yarn. So this one's quite a yarn eater, and there are some quite complex looking cables on here, but I do think it's absolutely beautiful. I really like the sample of this one that's in a really dark colour. I think it's a black if I remember rightly, possibly a really dark grey. I would do it more in a really dark grey, but I do think this looks really, really nice. It's quite a long fit as well. The one thing to note is that it is, I don't know if I said it's bottom up, so it's a drop shoulder construction, but it's bottom up. Quite a lot of these cardigans actually are bottom up. I was surprised. So yeah, I will mention the construction type of each of them, and this one is one that is a bottom up drop shoulder construction. The next one to talk about is the Cherub cardigan by Rowan Mary. This is a beautiful sort of ethereal looking cardigan. It's got some really nice texture details around the sleeves and some texture details down the sort of neckline, but it's a bit less intense than cables and things like that. One thing to note about this is that it is seamed, so it's knit flat and seamed up, and it's knit in worsted weight yarn on 5mm needles with a very similar gauge to the last one. Actually, I think it's exactly the same, so 16 stitches but 24 rows for this one, and I think this looks really good in a sort of fluffier yarn, so maybe holding a fingering weight and a worsted and a mohair or a sori together to give it that fluff. I think it looks really, really nice in that, and I love the creamy colour that she's used for this. I think that makes it look really sort of cherubic, which is called the Cherub cardigan. This one comes from an extra small all the way up to a 5X, which is a 75cm to 154cm finished bust. Apologies, some of these came in centimetres and inches. If I've got inches, I'll always use inches, but if not, I've done it in centimetres. It has a recommended 15 to 20 centimetres of ease, and it is they recommend 700 metres to 1,500 metres worth of yarn. It has these, the one thing I would probably change is it's got quite sort of balloony sleeves, and I just find that doesn't work super well for me in terms of wearability. She says with a massive, you can see the sleeve of this one there, it's got a massive balloon on it. In terms of wearability, I tend not to reach for stuff like that so much, so I'd probably try and do a slimmer fitting sleeve, but otherwise I would do that exactly the same. The next one to talk about is the Amesbury cardigan by Cheryl Mokhtari. Now, I've heard Cheryl's name a lot, but I've never knit anything from her, and this one looks like a beautiful, beautiful pattern. This is a fairly simple design, I will say that off the bat. It is a saddle shoulder construction, so you're going to be going from the top down. So yeah, this is a saddle shoulder construction, so you're going from the top down. It's knit in a DK weight yarn on 4mm needles with a gauge of 21 stitches to 28 rows per 4 inches. And it comes in sizes 1 to 11, which is a 75cm to 150cm bust with 20cm of positive ease recommended. I would probably do it with a bit less than that. That is a lot of positive ease for me. Cardigans I like when they're a bit oversized, but that would be a lot for me. 20cm of positive ease is really big. I think what really makes this shine for me, and the thing that made it stand out and that made me want to put it on here, is this sample that they've knit it in. So it's using a mild yarn. Are you okay there? Do I smell interesting? What? It's using like a mild yarn. So this is, I'm sorry if I butcher the name of this, is Camarosa, and it looks like Host, but it won't be. I think it's probably Host or Hust. And it seems to be a mild yarn. It's using one strand of this, so she hasn't done that through, doing that together. And that really, I think that looks really nice. So either using maybe 2 fingering weight yarns together to create that mild, or a mild DK weight would work really well. But I think that's what made this jump off the page to me. It's a really nice sort of classic construction with that saddle shoulder, but that mild yarn really makes it stand out. I do think it'd look nice in a solid colour too, but what made this a bit different was particularly that yarn for me, I think, definitely. The next one is a colourwork pattern that I wanted to talk about. So this is the Thistle by Johanna. So I'm currently knitting a sample knit for Botanical Yarns, which is patterned by Johanna, and it's the first time I've ever knit one by her, and it's really, really lovely and it's well written. It's also very size inclusive. This one isn't, it still is size inclusive, but when I say the other one is very size inclusive, I'm knitting the sprout and it has, I think it's extra, extra small, medium 1, medium 2, large 1, large 2, extra large, extra, extra large. It's got those extra bits in the middle, so it's got a really extensive size range. This one goes from extra, extra small all the way up to 5XL, so still size inclusive, but doesn't have the M1, M2, L1, L2. But this is probably one of the more advanced patterns on here. This is a top-down colourwork steeked sweater cardigan. So I steeked for the first time like back end of last year, and it was the Selbu coat by Skein, which is also another one that I would really recommend. That pattern was lovely. And steeking was terrifying the first time I did it, but once you've done it, it's really quite liberating being able to just go, do you know what, I'm just going to cut this. So I would say don't be too frightened by it, just choose your yarns wisely. Choose something that's a bit toothy, that has a bit of grip to it, and reinforce. But this, again, I love the colours of the sample of this. I love that sort of almost chartreusey yellow that really pops against the neutral background, but this would look good in so many different colours. I saw somebody do the Selbu coat, or it might even have been the sample of the Selbu coat was in black and white, and this would also look really good in black and white. This is quite an investment, so not only is it steeked, but it is fingering weight yarn on 3.5mm needles with a gauge of 20 stitches and 28 rows per 4 inches. Like I said, it comes in sizes of extra, extra small to 5XL, and that is a 35.25 inch finished bust all the way up to a 70.5 inch finished bust with a 6 inch ease recommended in the pattern. I have completely forgotten to write down the yardage requirements on this one, so I will pop them up on screen with it. Really sorry, I've completely forgotten to get that. The next one to talk about is one that I thought was really, really interesting, and I'm going to probably pronounce the name wrong, so I'll make sure it's on screen. I think it's the Nynaeve by Audrey Borrego, who is on Instagram as Yarn Flakes, if you want to follow her over there. Audrey has quite an extensive catalogue of patterns, and there's some really lovely ones in there. This is no exception. So this is a drop shoulder top down cardigan, and what really drew me to this is it's textured, but it's asymmetrically textured. So on one side you've got this beautiful texture, which I think is sort of, I don't know if it's cables, I can't remember, I don't think it's cables, I think it's all knits and pearls. And then the other side is actually plain, so you've got that sort of contrast, and you could obviously do them on both sides, you could do both sides plain, but it's a really nice sort of contrast that I don't think I've seen people doing before, certainly not when it's textured and plain. I've seen people do like different colours, but yeah, I thought this looked really, really interesting. So this is knit in DK weight yarn, excuse me, it is 21 stitches to 36 rows on 4mm needles, so the row gauge is quite tight actually. And this comes in sizes 1 to 9, which is a 41.25 inch finished bust, all the way up to a 72.75 inch finished bust. The lower end of that is obviously quite big, but that's because it recommends quite a lot of positive ease, and this is the finished bust measurement. So she recommends a minimum of 7.75 inches of positive ease, all the way up to 13.75 inches of positive ease. So again, that would probably be a bit much for me. I'd very definitely do it on the smaller end of that. I'd maybe even do a little bit less positive ease than that. But yeah, the size range again is really good, because with that big range of ease built in there, you can really sort of adjust. This recommends between 1,000 metres and 1,900 metres of a DK weight yarn, and again, I really love the sample colour of this. I think this would look really good as well in like a cream or a neutral, because you'd really see that texture pop, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. The next one that I wanted to talk about is a pattern from a designer that I absolutely love. I've tested it for, again, I think 3 times at this point. Twice, but I've knit one of her other patterns as well. And she also has a podcast. She creates yarn that she dyes, and she creates some really beautiful patterns. So this is the Scrumper cardigan the Scrumper cardigan by Marina Skua. Now Marina there is a waistcoat version of the Scrumper as well. So if you like this pattern, but you don't want it as a cardigan, or you fancy knitting yourself a waistcoat, it's really beautiful. I've had my eye on it for quite a bit. I just, I know, if I'm honest with myself, I won't wear a waistcoat. I wish I was the kind of person that could. Marina really pulls it off, and you see her on Instagram wearing it, and in her sample photos, it's stunning. I just know I wouldn't wear it, but a cardigan I would. So this is a bottom-up cardigan with moss stitch bands and these cables going up the side, and I think they then go down your sleeves as well. The Scrumper has the same cable detail around the edge and everything. And what I really love about this, it's a beautiful pattern in and of its own right, but I really love the yarn she's chosen for it. So Marina does have her own range of yarn, like I mentioned. The Mendip DK and the Mendip 4-ply are some of the nicest yarns that I've ever used. And unusually, I think, for somebody who makes their own yarn, she hasn't used her own yarn in this design. She has used John Arbon, and she's used their Appledore DK, which has this almost like colour changing thing to it. I think it's the way that they spin. From what I understand, I'm going to explain this really poorly, and I hope I get it right. So from what I understand, rather than is it dyed in the wool? So the colours are dyed and then different colours are spun together to create a certain effect, rather than the wool being spun and then and the wool being spun and then being dyed to be that colour. I think each strand is dyed separately, so it has some really interesting colours with it, and it gives some really interesting depth to the fabric. And I think that was a really, really good choice. She's done the same for the Scrumper as well. And they're just so beautiful. So I would, and it's a yarn that I've heard a lot of people talk very positively about. So I would love to try their Appledore DK, and I think I would probably splurge because it is a little bit more on the expensive side than I would normally go for. I would probably splurge and I would probably try that. So yeah, it's a DK weight cardigan, knit on 3.75mm needles with a 21 stitch and 28 row gauge, and it comes in at sizes 1 to 10 with a 34.25 inch finished bust all the way up to a 68.5 inch finished bust, and this has a relatively small amount of ease. One thing I did notice, and I don't know if this is just the way that patterns are currently, all of these seem to have a quite a high amount of positive ease, and this is far and away the lowest. At 0.5 inches of positive ease recommended. It's quite a fitted garment, and I think that looks really, really lovely with this. You could quite easily size up a little bit and give yourself a bit more space if you wanted to, but I really love this, definitely. So number 9, the next one that I wanted to talk about is the Oldfashioned by Maxim Cyr, who is Max the Knitter. You may know him better as. Max has some really fantastic patterns that I have. I've got one that I've tried to knit, and I just my yarn wasn't the right gauge. Again, I didn't gauge swatch. It's supposed to be an Aran weight pattern. I got something that says Aran, and actually it's more like a DK, so it wasn't working. And what I was going to knit was the single malt sweater, and the Old-Fashioned is a cardigan version of the single malt sweater. So this is a top-down raglan cardigan knit in Aran weight yarn with this gorgeous, I think it's either moss stitch or seed stitch or double moss stitch texture all over. And what I love about Max's patterns is that I think he specifically designs them to be unisex and to be fitting for male presenting and female presenting bodies, but he puts them on male models. And I know a couple of people, I hear Jonathan Day talking about him a lot because he's a man knitting for himself and knitting for his partner who is also a man. So a lot of things are unisex, but sometimes they don't necessarily look as good on a man as they would on a woman, because they're intended to be made for somebody with maybe a bit narrow shoulders and a bigger bust. Whereas Max's patterns, I think, are aimed more at masculine presenting. And I just think, yeah, they look really, really good. This is one I would love to make for my other half. I have some yarn in stash that would work for it. And I think I'm probably going to be casting this on at some point. So like I said, this is an Aran weight top-down raglan sweater knit on 5mm needles with a 16 stitch and 26 row gauge. It's this beautiful all-over texture, and he's got these details, that quite wide raglans as well, which makes a really sort of prominent feature of the raglans. I also really like the collar that stands up a little bit that he's got on this one. I think it looks really, really nice, and I love the aesthetic that he uses when he takes his pictures as well. I'm a sucker for a good aesthetic. And I think he hits it really, really well with these things. They're really, really good. This comes in sizes 1 to 9, which is a 33.25 inch to 65.25 inch finished bust, and again recommends 4 to 8 inches of positive ease. I would probably do this somewhere in the middle for my other half. He wouldn't want it massively oversized, but I also wouldn't want it to be too tight fitting. The one thing to note about this is it doesn't have any buttons. It's intended to be worn as an open cardigan, so if, like my other half, your partner likes to be able to button up his cardigans, you might need to make an adjustment to do that, because it isn't intended to be worn that way. It recommends 732 metres to 1,766 metres of yarn, And the yarn that I intend to use for this is something that I've seen people use for the project on Ravelry, is Drops Alaska, which I have in the stash, which is 100% wool. The next one I want to talk about is probably the biggest investment of time of the whole thing. Again, it's all over cables. You can tell that's what I'm really being drawn to at the moment. But this is the Sunday Morning Cardigan by Yarnia Designs. I've test knitted for Hannah of Yarnia Designs 3 times again now. This isn't one that I've test knitted, but I think this is absolutely stunning. This is a bottom up, long line, all over cabled, all over textured cardigan. I love knitting cables and texture, but even I look at this and go, God, that would be an investment. So that's worth bearing in mind. That is also reflected in the yardages when we get to that. Hannah's patterns are lovely. They strike a really good balance between not being too overly detailed and hand-holding you through everything, but also not being too basic. I think they're great beginner patterns. My first ever sweater that I knit was a test knit for Hannah. And the fact that not only could I knit my first sweater with really no problems, but also do it under test knit conditions, says a lot about the clarity of her patterns. And yeah, I would say, even though this looks quite daunting and it's quite an extensive pattern, I would say the way that she writes and the support that she can give if you've got any questions means that this would actually be fairly accessible for most people. I do really love the colour that she's made the sample in. I think it's an unusual colour for a cable cardigan. Most people wouldn't pick a sort of a tonal variegated pink, but I think it looks really nice. I wouldn't wear it myself. We've had this discussion before. I'm not a pink person, but I think it looks really, really good, and it encourages me to maybe, look at more hand-dyed yarns for cardigans. This is a DK weight yarn on 3.75mm needles. It is knit bottom up, like I said. And it has a 22 stitch and 28 row gauge. The sizes go from size 1 to size 10, which is 38 inch to 74 inch finished bust, and again it has a recommended ease of 8 to 12 inches. The yardages, like I said, are quite high for this one because of the amount of, it's long and there's a lot of cables and stuff in there which do tend to eat yarn a little bit. So it recommends 1,291 metres to 2,688 metres of yarn. So this is a yarn eater and this is a commitment, but I do think it's stunning. I think it's absolutely stunning. This would look good in pretty much every colour, I think. But again, something sort of quite neutral would really help those cables pop. Number 11 is the one that I forgot that I've added on, is the Chained Oblivion by Kelcey Garner, who I think you may know better as Knitting Nikabi. This is beautiful. I remember seeing when this was being tested. Kat of Heather and Hops, Kat Weaver, tested this. Shy, who you might have seen if you've watched my favourite YouTubers I watch, she test knitted this as well. And I just was in awe of it all along. This is a bottom-up bomber style cardigan, so it has that slightly oversized look. It hits sort of like a bomber jacket would, fairly cropped up your body. It has the slightly bomber style or balloon style sleeves. But there's some really, really nice details in this one. So one thing that I like that you can't see very easily on the samples, but it's got thumb holes, and I think I have a hoodie that has thumb holes in it and I adore it. There's something about it, there's something really comforting in it. So you knit the sleeves a bit long and you knit these thumb holes in them, and I can completely see that being really, really fun. But the main thing about this, obviously it's called Chained Oblivion, and it has cables that run up the front and then run down your arms. And these cables have been designed to look like a chain, and they really do. I'll see if I can put up a close up, but they look like chain links, and I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. I think it's a really interesting play on a very traditional sort of cabled cardigan, but making it a little bit more modern, a bit more edgy, and I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. The sample isn't in black, which I would say I think it looks great in black, but it maybe doesn't do it so much justice because you can't quite see the details of those. And one of the reasons that I know that I love this and I want to knit this is because of Shy's version. So Shy knit hers in pink, which again is not something that I would choose. It was a hot bubblegum pink, but because it was such a bright colour, you could really see these cables. And I was just looking at her knitting it going, that's a chain. That literally is chain links going all the way up. It's so clever how she's done it. So I think, and at the back of my mind, I think this would look really good in a mid-grey, like that sort of armour chain colour. Maybe something similar to this colour, I think would look really, really good in that. You'd still see the definition of the cables. It would lend itself to that, or even in like a deep foresty green. I think it would look great. So this is the DK weight cardigan. It has 3.5, sorry, it's knit on 3.5mm needles, and it has a gauge of 26 stitches and 38 rows in seed stitch. So it is quite a dense gauge for DK weight yarn. That is something that I would need to play about with a little bit, because I've done something at that sort of gauge before and it really hurt my hands. So I'd need to play about with that a little bit. But honestly, for this, I would make it work, because that is so stunning. This comes in sizes I to A, no, A to I, all the way around. A size A is a 30 to 32 inch bust, bust circumference, not finished bust circumference. And I is a 62 to 64 inch finished bust, and it has a recommended ease of 3 to 5 inches, which is why you have the range of sizes there. Again, it's a bit of a yarn eater. It recommends 1,417 metres to 2,616 metres of DK weight yarn. I know Shine knit hers in a drops, I think it was drops baby merino, so you could get a quite affordable sort of yarn to knit this with, and I just think this is gorgeous. I would love to knit this one. I think this would be a really sort of statement piece. And we're on to the last one, which is a bit of a bonus one. It's like a special mention, and the reason is that it's not actually out yet. However, I'm pretty certain it's either coming out later today when I'm filming or the day after I'm filming. So I haven't got full details on it, which is why it's sort of a special mention, but I would highly, highly recommend you go and check this out. So this is the Elara cardigan by Emily Chen, who is Knits. Again, I have test knit for Emily 3 times in the past. One of my favourite finished objects from earlier in the year is the Leo's cabled sweater, which is a test knit I completed for her. We've got the Winona polo as well, which was absolutely gorgeous. She's a relatively new designer. I think this is she's been quite active recently. I think when I first tested for her, she only had 4 patterns. And now I think she's released maybe about 5 or 6 already this year. And she's got more under testing at the moment. She's been quite prolific at the moment, and she's got some really interesting designs. Her stuff that she does is very detail oriented and considered, and there'll be little things in there that you think, why am I doing this? And then when you finish it, you're like, oh, okay, because it's this little detail that makes it, it's very, very considered, really interesting stuff, quite modern stuff again. And the Elara cardigan is it's a cabled sweater. It's got these really interesting sort of triangular cables running down it, and I haven't got the full information, there we go, of whether it's top down or bottom up or whatever. Because it's going to be released in the next couple of days, and I would highly recommend you can go check it out. I haven't got the sizing information either, but having test knit for Emily, like I say several times, I can promise you it'll be very extensive size range, and it'll be completely size inclusive. Her stuff always is. I just really like this. I think this is quite a modern take again on a cabled cardigan. One thing I would maybe do a bit differently is, I think from what I remember on the sample pictures, the neckline sits a bit wide, and I would probably try and bring that in a little bit and have it sit a bit closer around the neck, but that's personal preference. I do know I've got some information about yardages and about gauge, because she shared it on her Instagram recently. So this has a recommended, it's recommended to be knit in a fluffy worsted weight yarn. So one of the samples that she knit used Drops Melody as an example, and I don't know the needle size, but it's a gauge of 17 stitches and 26 rows in stockinette. So I'm suspecting, looking at the other ones that we've got, that we're looking at maybe maybe a 4.5 mil, probably 4 to 5 mil, somewhere like that. And then 21 stitches to 26 rows on the cable pattern. That's always going to be a bit tighter because you cable them. She recommends 1,024 metres to 1,829 metres of a fluffy, like I said, fluffy worsted weight yarn. You could do this in a non-fluffy yarn to give real definition. She shared a really nice post on her stories again with some more information about this. And I think I took a screenshot, so I'll try and share it. But she's got 4 different swatches and 4 different types of yarn, so you can see what it would look like in something very fluffy, something less fluffy, something not at all fluffy, to see what you want to knit. So that is a bit of I haven't got the full information on that one, but like I say, it's due to be released very shortly. There will probably be some sort of release day discount. I think Emily does those, so if you're interested in that, I would definitely go and check it out. And very highly recommend her patterns. Again, they are more on the thorough side. Everything that you could possibly need is included in there, but you will come out with an absolutely stunning garment at the end of it. And that is everything that I wanted to talk about today. Honestly, I was looking through Ravelry at options and things, and I could have gone on for hours about all of them. Clearly, I'm in the mood for sort of cabled and textured things at the moment, but there are some really beautiful stockinette ones that are coming out. There's plenty of other beautiful cabled ones I could have mentioned. There's some really nice colour work ones as well. But yeah, I'm really interested to know what you're looking forward to, if there's any new releases coming out that you're really interested in, that you want to try, any of these that you're going to go and give a look to, or any of the designers that you're going to go and give a look to, and let me know what cardigan patterns you would recommend, if there's any that you think that I should have a look at that I might like that I haven't considered on here. But thank you very much, guys, for your time. I hope this hasn't been too all over the place with the stopping and starting. It feels like it might have been, so I'm really hoping it isn't. But yeah, let me know if you're going to knit any of these, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.